About half of American renters now hand over more than 30% of their income just to keep a roof over their head. Not the extras, the roof. And housing is different from every other trap in this series because both doors out of the room look broken. Keep renting, and everyone tells you you're setting money on fire every single month. Try to buy, and the median American home now costs about $420,000. So today we're doing the thing almost nobody online will do. The honest math. On both doors with no team jersey on. Because the trap isn't renting, and it isn't owning, it's the default. Here's the plan. 6 line items on today's receipt. 1. The 30% rule is dead. The budgeting rule everyone still quotes comes from another era, and for about half of renters it isn't even a choice anymore. 2. Renting is throwing money away is a lie, because owning has its own rent, and almost nobody counts it. 3. The down payment treadmill, why the finish line keeps moving faster than you can run toward it. 4. When buying actually wins, because it genuinely does in specific situations, and I'll hand you the exact tests. 5. House poor, why the bank's yes might be the most expensive word in American life. And 6, the real comparison, the one matchup that actually settles rent versus own, honestly. Then the escape, and it works through either door. Let's open the receipt. First, how did normal get here? Housing didn't become the biggest bill of your life because you did something wrong. For decades, wages climbed slowly while rents and home prices climbed fast. And then the culture handed you exactly 2 scripts for dealing with it. Script 1. Renting is throwing money away, so buy as soon as humanly possible whatever it takes. Script 2. The bank said yes, so borrow whatever the bank said. Nobody sat down and chose those scripts. Nobody ran the numbers on them. They're defaults. And this series has one thesis. Normal is broke. The default is always where the money leaks. So let's print the receipt. And this episode, it comes split down the middle. On the left, the renter's lifetime receipt, decades of rent, creeping up almost every year, ending in a big red total with no asset at the bottom. On the right, the owner's receipt. And look closely, because under mortgage come the lines nobody reads out loud. Interest, property taxes, insurance, maintenance, 2 receipts, 2 red totals. The question was never which piece of paper is free. Neither is. The question is which receipt you're managing on purpose. That's what the next 6 line items decide. Line item 1. The 30% rule is dead. You know the rule. Never spend more than 30% of your income on housing. It gets repeated like timeless wisdom, but it isn't timeless at all. It traces back to public housing guidelines from more than half a century ago, an economy where one income could rent a decent place, feed a family, and still put something away. The rule outlived the world that wrote it. Here's the number from national housing data. About half of American renters now spend more than 30% of their income on housing, and millions of those spend more than 50%. Sit with that for a second. For roughly 1 renter in 2, the most basic rule in personal finance isn't being ignored. It's mathematically impossible. And I want to take your side here, because the internet answers this stat with, just move somewhere cheaper or just get a roommate, as if you hadn't thought of that. Cheaper usually means farther from the job, the family, the second job, and the commute quietly eats the savings in gas, hours, and sanity. The jobs cluster in the expensive places. That's not a flaw in your choices. That's the shape of the market you were handed. So no, this is not a latte problem. You cannot skip enough coffees to fix a rent that takes 40% of your paycheck. Here's the reframe the whole episode runs on. If the rule is dead, the guilt attached to it should die with it. Being over 30% doesn't mean you failed a test. It means the test was written for a different century. What you still control is the gap, what's left over after housing. And the two biggest levers on that gap are which door you pick and how much door you take on. That's where the rest of this receipt goes. Line item 2. Renting is throwing money away is a lie. Or more precisely, it's half the story, told as if it were the whole thing. Everyone can see the renter's money leave. First of the month, gone. Nothing to show for it. What almost nobody itemizes is that owning has its own rent. Call it phantom rent. Everything an owner pays each month that builds exactly zero equity. The same zero the renter gets accused of. Walk the lines with me. Mortgage interest. In the early years of a standard 30-year loan, most of the monthly payment isn't buying the house at all. It's interest. You're renting money from the bank, and early on, that's most of the bill. Property taxes, forever, and they usually go up. Homeowners insurance, forever, and lately it's been climbing fast. Maintenance, the roof, the water heater, the furnace. A common rule of thumb is 1 to 2% of the home's value per year, on average. On a $420,000 home, that alone can run several $100s a month. Some years it's zero. Some years it's a $15,000 roof. The average never stops being real. Stack those lines up and a huge slice of the owner's monthly outflow is thrown away in exactly the sense renters get insulted for. The cleanest way I've ever heard it put, your rent is the maximum you'll pay for housing this month. The owner's mortgage payment is the minimum they'll pay. Now hold on, this is not the part where I tell you renting wins. Line item 4 is coming, and owning has real honest advantages. The point here is narrower, and it matters. The famous insult is just bad accounting. A renter isn't a sucker. A renter is buying a roof plus flexibility with a known worst case. That's a real product, and sometimes it's exactly the right one. Line item 3, the down payment treadmill. The median American home now costs about $420,000. That's national housing data, and remember what median means. Half of homes cost more. The classic advice says put 20% down. Say the math out loud. That's $84,000. In cash. Before closing costs, before the moving truck, before the first surprise repair the inspection missed. Now run the treadmill. Say you can save $1,000 a month, which back in line item 1 we established is heroic when rent already takes a third of your check. That's $12,000 a year. Call it 7 years to the down payment. But home prices don't wait 7 years. If prices rise even 4 or 5% a year, that $420,000 home costs somewhere around $550,000 by the time you arrive. And the 20% target has grown by more than $20,000 while you were sprinting at it. That's the treadmill. You're running honestly and hard, and the finish line is on wheels. And yes, smaller down payments exist. Low down payment programs can get you in the door with 5%, sometimes 3%. But be honest about the trade. A smaller down payment means a bigger loan, plus mortgage insurance, one more line of phantom rent, so the treadmill doesn't disappear. It just moves inside the mortgage where it's harder to see. Here's the de-shaming part, because it matters. If you're 30-something and don't have 80 grand sitting in cash, you're not bad with money. You're standing on a moving walkway that runs backward, being told to feel guilty about your pace. The problem was never your legs, it's the walkway. Line item 4, and this is the steel man, because buying genuinely wins sometimes, and pretending otherwise would make this episode a lie in the other direction. Here's when the owning door honestly beats the renting door. Test 1. The 5-year rule. Buying and selling a home carries enormous transaction costs, agent commissions, closing costs, moving, the works, often close to 10% of the home's price, round trip. Stay 5, 7, 10 years, and those costs spread thin enough to stop mattering. Move after 2 years and they eat you alive. If you can't picture staying at least 5 years, the buying door is probably closed, no matter what the market is doing. Test 2. Price to rent. Take the home's price and divide it by a year of rent for the equivalent place. Where that ratio is low, buying gets attractive. Where it's sky high, renting the exact same house is simply cheaper, sometimes dramatically. Run that number for your actual city, not for the internet's imaginary one. And then there are the two advantages that never show up in a spreadsheet. Forced savings. A mortgage is a commitment device. Every payment shaves off a little principal, whether you're feeling disciplined that month or not. And humans are famously bad at investing money nobody forces them to invest. And stability. A fixed payment freezes the biggest bill of your life while rents climb around you, year after year. Nobody can sell the house out from under your kid's school year. Nobody can decline to renew your lease. You can paint the walls. That stability is a real yield. It just pays out in life instead of dollars. So yes, if you'll stay 5+ years, the price to rent math is sane, and this part matters, you buy less than your maximum. Buying is often the right door. The trap was never the door. Hold that thought. Line item 5. House poor is the American default. Here's the moment the trap actually springs. And notice, it springs inside the winning door. You go to get pre-approved, and the bank comes back with a number, and the number is almost always shockingly big. It feels like a compliment. It isn't. The bank's number is your maximum, the most they can lend you while keeping their own risk acceptable, calculated on ratios that contain no line for daycare, no line for retirement, no line for your car dying, no line for having a life. Approved is a lending word. It is not a safety word. And then notice how the room is built. The agent's commission grows with the price. The lender's loan grows with the price. The seller wants the price. Everyone at that table is perfectly nice, and every incentive at that table points in exactly the same direction, your maximum. Nobody in the room is paid to say, buy less. So the average buyer does the normal thing, takes a number near the top of the approval, and becomes the most common broke person in America, the house-poor homeowner. Beautiful house, gorgeous kitchen, empty everything else. Retirement contributions paused just for a while. Emergency fund running on fumes, every other jar squeezed so the house jar can overflow. One furnace, one transmission, one bad month away from a credit card balance that never quite dies. And listen, nobody signs up for that on purpose. They did what the process is engineered to produce. That's the whole thesis of this series. The trap is built into the default settings. The bank approved it is the housing version of everyone has a car payment. The approval was never the finish line. It was the sales pitch. Line item 6, the real comparison because rent versus own was always the wrong matchup. There are really 3 contestants. Contestant 1, buy the bank's maximum. Contestant 2, buy well under it. Contestant 3, rent and invest the difference. Here's the part the renting is throwing money away crowd never mentions. Contestant 3 can win. If renting your place costs genuinely less than owning it all in, mortgage, taxes, insurance, maintenance, the whole phantom rent stack, and you invest that difference every single month in something boring, the math gets loud. A few $100s a month, compounding at roughly 7%, a boring index fund's historical average, not a guarantee, grows into 6 figures over a couple of decades. Run it long enough, and the disciplined renter beats the house-poor owner. Not occasionally, reliably, but, and this is the honest part the pro-renting crowd skips, that only works if the difference actually gets invested. And in the real world, almost nobody does it. The difference doesn't go to an index fund, it goes to dinner. It dissolves quietly into the month, and at the end of 30 years, there's no house and no portfolio either. That is the actual failure mode of renting, not the rent, the leak. So look at the real scoreboard. Rent and invest the difference, wins. Buy modest and stay, wins. Rent and spend the difference, loses. Buy the maximum, loses. See the pattern yet? The winners aren't a door. Both winning strategies are deliberate, and both losing strategies are the default. Which means the question you brought to this video, should I rent or should I buy, was never really the question. The question is, are you going to run your housing on purpose or on autopilot? Because autopilot has a total at the bottom of the receipt, and it's printed in red. So here's the escape, and it works through whichever door you're standing in front of. If you're buying, take the bank's number and cut it. Seriously, decide your own ceiling before you ever get pre-approved, based on what leaves room for retirement, for savings, for an actual life. A rough guide: keep the whole housing bill, payment, taxes, insurance, maintenance, at a level where you can still invest every month without wincing. Buy the house that fits the life, not the loan. And the gap between what they offered and what you took? That's not leftover money. Give it a job. Automatic, monthly, invested. If you're renting, stop apologizing and start capturing. Add up what owning your place would truly cost all in, subtract your rent, and automate that difference into a boring index fund on payday, the same day the check lands before the month can eat it. That one automation is the entire distance between renting and building wealth and renting forever. That's it. Both escapes are the same single move wearing different clothes. You choose the number and you automate the gap. No side hustle required, no moving to the middle of nowhere, no rice and beans. The renter who invests the difference and the owner who bought below the max end up in the same place, housed, calm, and compounding, while the defaults on either side of them stay broke in bigger and bigger houses. The door was never the decision. The decision was always deliberate versus default. Pick deliberate, behind either door. So, comments, and be honest. Rent or own, and do you regret it? What would you tell the version of you standing in front of the other door? I'll be reading every answer. This is education, not financial advice. Just the receipt. Read out loud. And next time, the receipt goes to a party. The average American wedding now costs $35,000, and about half of couples take on debt for one single day, front-loaded into the exact years when compounding matters most. That's episode 4, the $35,000 party. I'll see you there.